Niagara Falls. Tourists from across the globe have been attracted to the majestic beauty of the falls for more than 2 centuries. But the deceptive beauty of the falls is also a call to danger. Attention seekers have courted that danger, daring to plunge over the falls in homemade barrels. Others have dared a tightrope walk over the soaring heights. Since 1850, about 5,000 bodies have been found at the foot of the falls. An estimated 20 to 30 people use the falls each year to commit suicide. The falls have even been used in an attempt to cover up a gruesome murder. The tranquility of this tourist attraction was shattered on July 9, 1903. That day, William LeBlond, operator of the popular tour boat Maid of the Mist, found a mangled, bloated body in the Niagara Gorge, a natural pool just upstream from the falls. The man's leg had been shorn off, likely due to the boat's propellers. The only clothing left on the body was his tie and his socks. Shortly thereafter, the body was identified as baseball superstar Ed Delahanty. Delahanty was last seen on July 2nd, when he boarded a train to New York in an attempt to revive a lucrative contract he had signed with the Giants, but had been canceled due to the negotiated peace between the National and American leagues. Delahanty had been depressed, gaining 60 pounds in the off-season due to the money he owed to bookies and to loan sharks because of his uncontrolled gambling. A heavy drinker and upset with his wife's illness, many had heard Delahanty expressing his desire to die or an uncaring attitude over whether he would die. His younger brother Frank noted the absence of Ed's diamond rings and cash. Frank cried foul play. Was this suicide? Murder? Or did a number of unfortunate events add up to a tragic but accidental death to the man who had won the American League's batting title only a year earlier? What happened to Big Ed Delahanty, the King of SWAT, remains shrouded in mystery to this day. Born in Cleveland on October 30, 1867, Edward James Delahanty was born to Irish immigrants James and Bridget Delahanty. Famine, disease, it all meant that prospects were better in America than back home in Ireland. So in the mid-19th century, the immigration from Ireland to America exploded. But while life in America was better than life in Ireland, Irish immigrants still struggled. James had to work a variety of jobs in order to support his family, and Bridget turned the family home into a boarding house. So Ed and his younger brother spent a lot of time outside of the house in order to avoid the chaos of running a border house. And while spending that time outside, they learned how to play the American sport of baseball. At the time, professional baseball served as an excellent opportunity for young men to escape the doldrums of hard manual labor. And fortunately for Ed, he and his brother showed natural talent for the game. Ed's talent landed him with a semi-pro team called the Cleveland Shamrocks. He then signed with a team out of Mansfield for the Ohio State League, where he earned $50 a month. The financial opportunities that playing professional baseball gave Ed led to him dropping out of St. Joseph's College and devoting himself to the sport full-time. In 1887, the 19-year-old Ed batted .351 and scored 90 runs for the Mansfield team. Big Ed started in 1888 with the Wheeling team of the Tri-State League, and he was batting .421 after 23 games. In the meantime, the Philadelphia Phillies were looking for a replacement for Charlie Ferguson. He was slated to be their starting second baseman that year. He happened to be a talented pitcher who could also hit, so at first he started playing outfield on the days that he wasn't pitching, and then he started playing second base. In 1887, Ferguson batted a healthy .337. But all that activity took a toll on Ferguson's health. By the end of the season, he would start to feel tired. In 1886 and 1887, he ended the season early because of exhaustion. Now, it didn't help that his teammates thought he was a hypochondriac because when he would travel on the road, he would bring a medicine kit with him. But all of this exhaustion left Ferguson vulnerable for other disease. So in April of 1888, Ferguson had a high fever. He began to show spots on his chest. And by April 29, 1888, Ferguson was dead of typhoid. The Phillies finished in second place in 1887 and expected to make a run at the pennant in 1888. but suddenly they found themselves in need of a new second baseman. They thought they had found their answer when they heard about this hotshot hitter who was playing in the Tri-State League, and so the Phillies purchased the contract of Ed Delahanty for $2,000. The teenage Ed Delahanty was now a major leaguer. Delahanty's first season with the Phillies, he batted an unimpressive .228. He improved in 1889 to .293, but only played 56 games. A revolt over the reserve clause and other major labor issues was simmering. John Montgomery Ward, who was a pitcher for the New York Giants, had organized the Brotherhood of Professional Baseball Players. He received financing and started a new league in 1890, the Players' League. This league was based on more player-friendly contracts, and so Ward encouraged a number of talented players to jump from the National League and the American Association to the Players' League. One such player was Ed Delahanty, who played the 1890 season with the Cleveland Infants. The problem is that the country couldn't support three major leagues, and so all three leagues felt the financial pinch. The backers of the Players' League got cold feet and withdrew their support, so the Players' League folded after just one season. The National League and the American Association agreed to honor each other's list of reserve players. Those were players that had left their teams in order to play in the Players' League and now had to come back and join their former teams. This meant that Ed Delahanty had to return to the Phillies in 1891. And in his first season since rejoining the Phillies, Delahanty hit a dismal .243. Things began to change in 1892. That year, Delahanty batted .306 and led the majors with 21 triples and a slugging percentage of .495. This was the beginning of a decade where Ed Delahanty dominated the National League with his offense. By this time, he had moved to left field, and Ed demonstrated that he had a powerful arm. So he was a player who could hit for average, hit for power. He was fleet around the base paths, and he was talented on defense. Ed Delahanty was a superstar of the 1890s. Between 1892 and 1901, Ed Delahanty batted over .400 4 times. He won the National League batting title in 1899 with a .410 average. He led the league in triples once and in doubles 4 times. He showed his power by leading the league in home runs twice and RBIs 3 times. He even led the National League in stolen bases with 58 in 1898. To this day, Ed Delahanty leads the Phillies in career triples with 158. He's second all-time in Phillies singles, doubles, RBIs, runs scored, and batting average. Delahanty is third in total bases, stolen bases, and WAR with the Phillies. In December of 1902, the New York Giants offered Ed $8,000 a year to play in the National League once again. A personnel war between the National League and the upstart American League made this possible. Delahanty earned the nickname the King of SWAT due to his offensive prowess that he demonstrated as a member of the Phillies in the 1890s. But Phillies owner, Colonel John Rogers, was notoriously stingy. When the American League declared itself a rival major league in 1901, and American League teams began poaching players from the National League with the promise of higher pay, the Phillies were one of the teams devastated by the situation. Delahanty himself accepted an offer to play for the Washington Senators in 1902 for $4,500, which was a significant raise from the $3,000 the Phillies paid him in 1901. That season, Delahanty led the American League in batting with a .376 average. In fact, in 1902, Delahanty led the majors in on-base percentage, slugging percentage, and doubles. But Delahanty needed more money for his gambling problem and his drinking problem. So he decided to take advantage of the personnel war between the National League and the American League. By now, John McGraw had become the manager of the New York Giants. He knew Delahanty's talent and was anxious to add him to the Giants roster. Delahanty was rewarded with an $8,000 contract, $4,000 of which was paid to him in advance. National League President Harry Pulliam and American League President Van Johnson recognized that poaching each other's players and encouraging league jumping was damaging to both leagues. Delahanty stood out as the most prominent example of a player who had been encouraged to break a contract for the 1903 season. It was beginning to look as though Delahanty may have his contract with the Giants voided. Delahanty expressed that he didn't care where he would wind up playing. He insisted that his contract guaranteed payment even if he were prevented to play due to an injunction or other unforeseen circumstance. The injunction was a reference to the fact that Delahanty's former owner, Colonel Rogers, had sued former teammate Nap Lajoie and the Philadelphia Athletics and won an injunction to prevent Lajoie from playing professional games in Pennsylvania. Delahanty was insistent that even if the leagues negotiated a peace, he would be entitled to keep the $4,000 advance from the Giants. Pulliam and Johnson reached an agreement that brought labor peace to the two major leagues, but that agreement resulted in the voiding of Ed Delahanty's contract with the Giants. Despite his initial protestations, Delahanty was forced to pay back the $4,000 advance from the Giants. However, the money was already gone, seeing that he had bookies and loan sharks on his tail. Delahanty agreed to have the money taken out of his 1903 salary with the Senators. Delahanty was set to earn $4,500 at the Senators in 1903, but $600 had been paid to him in advance. This essentially meant that in 1903, Delahanty had to pay $100 to play baseball professionally. But the Senators were a miserable team, finishing in 6th place below .500 in their inaugural season. Delahanty had grown used to playing for a contender with the Phillies. In fact, he had been part of the only team whose entire outfield consisted of future Hall of Famers, as he played alongside Slidin' Billy Hamilton and Sam Thompson in Philadelphia. In his despair, Delahanty ballooned to 230 pounds to begin the 1903 season. Senators manager Tom Loftus ordered Delahanty to a spa to get in shape. Upon returning to the Senators, Ed was batting .333 over 42 games, but he often challenged Loftus, who wanted Delahanty to play right field instead of left. Meanwhile, Loftus grew weary of Delahanty missing games due to headaches, a code word for his heavy drinking. George Davis was a shortstop who had a similar problem to that of Ed Delahanty in 1903. After a spectacular run in the 1890s, Davis jumped leagues to join the Chicago White Sox in 1902, who were paying him $4,000. The Giants offered Davis $6,700 to play with them in 1903, but the peace between the leagues prevented him from jumping back to the NL. On June 26, 1903, NL President Pulliam permitted Davis to return to the Giants. Delahanty appeared to believe that this would allow him to play for the Giants as well and have his $8,000 contract reinstated. Delahanty accompanied the Senators on their road trip to Detroit. However, he remained in his hotel room complaining of a headache. His mother and two of his younger brothers actually traveled to Detroit to confront him over his behavior. At the time, Delahanty began voicing a desire to kill himself. On July 1st, leaving his luggage and his Senator's uniform behind, Delahanty boarded the Michigan Central No. 6, a train bound to New York. Reportedly, he had $1,500 in jewelry and a considerable amount of cash on him. Allegedly, he wrote in a letter that he hoped that the train would derail on its way to New York. He had purchased a life insurance policy on himself and named his daughter Florence as the beneficiary. Delahanty also sent a telegram to his wife, Noreen, instructing her to meet him in Washington. This was the last that his family and his teammates had heard from Ed Delahanty. By July 4th, Noreen was waiting for her husband in Washington. By July 5th, the Washington Press began publishing reactions from manager Loftus and his teammates to this extended absence. Loftus called Delahanty overrated and revealed that his drinking had interfered in Delahanty's ability to play ball. At this point, Noreen and Loftus had grown used to Delahanty's occasional extended absences, but by July 7th, the two of them began sending out telegrams to determine his whereabouts. Keep in mind that this was well before the use of television or even radio as a common form of communications. Baseball fans may have been familiar with players' names and kept up with the season through the newspapers, but it would be rare for people outside of the team's home city to know a player by sight. On July 8th, Loftus received a telegram about an unidentified man who had been thrown off a train in Canada. The man had left a suitcase and a black leather bag on the train. Inside the bag was a pass to the Senators' ballpark, which belonged to Ed Delahanty. On July 9th, Ed's younger brother, Frank, who was an outfielder for the minor league team in Syracuse, had gone to identify the black leather bag. He received word that a body had been found in Niagara Gorge by William LeBond, captain of a boat that was popular with tourists, the Maid of the Mist. Frank saw the body and questioned how he could have been found still wearing a tie and socks, but the rest of his clothes, as well as a diamond pin and a number of diamond rings and his cash, were missing. To Frank, it made no sense that Ed's black bag was found on the train, but not his valuables. Frank Delahanty insisted that his brother had met with foul play. Sometime later, a local farmer turned up dead at the base of the falls, missing $1,500 that had been on his person. The implication being that someone, or even a group of people, were robbing people and throwing their bodies in the Niagara River. Mike Soule, author of a book about Delahanty's death, entitled July 2, 1903, claims that there were reports of someone following Delahanty. Further accounts emerged. A New York Times obituary reported that Delahanty had an open razor and was terrorizing passengers in a sleeper compartment. Delahanty had been drinking to excess and became confused and irate when he tried to enter a sleeper compartment that was already occupied. The report was that Delahanty tried to pull a woman, who was already asleep, out of the bed by grabbing her by the ankles. Train conductor John Cole became fed up with Delahanty's drunken misconduct. He threw Delahanty off the train before crossing the International Railway Bridge that connected Fort Erie, Ontario, to Buffalo, New York. Cole failed to follow proper procedures and simply left Delahanty at the Bridgeburg station instead of leaving Delahanty in police custody. Cole apparently warned Delahanty that he was in Canada now and that he ought to behave himself. Delahanty allegedly answered that he didn't care if he were in Canada or if he were dead. The New York Times article reported that Ed tried to cross the bridge on foot. A night watchman stopped him, but Delahanty pushed the watchman to the side. When the drawbridge opened, Delahanty plunged into the Niagara River. A Cleveland area newspaper, the Plain Dealer, reported that the night watchman was Sam Kingston, and that angry words were exchanged between Delahanty and Kingston, but it was not clear whether there was a physical struggle between them. Another report claims that Kingston found Delahanty leaning against an iron truss. Kingston shined his lantern in Delahanty's face, which angered Ed. Kingston attempted to grab Delahanty to keep him under control. Delahanty then ran across the bridge on foot. Kingston said that he saw Delahanty slip on the tracks. This was the early morning hours, so it was dark, and Kingston could not see what had happened to Delahanty. However, he reported hearing a splash in the water below. Still another account states that Delahanty had walked out onto the International Bridge and stood at its edge, staring down at the Niagara River. Kingston approached Delahanty, and the two were involved in some physical ruckus. Kingston attempted to drag Delahanty back to the train station, but Kingston fell and Delahanty escaped. Whether Delahanty then jumped or fell off the bridge, Kingston could not say, but it wound up with Delahanty in the Niagara River. The Plain Dealer reported that Noreen was very bitter towards the watchman, whom she claimed used excessive force in the struggle with Ed, which is supposed to have ended in his death. Was Ed Delahanty murdered for his valuables and money? He did owe a lot of money to some bad people. Even if the person reportedly following him was not working for a loan shark or bookie, Ed was apparently flashy, wearing his diamonds while traveling alone on a red-eye train. Did Ed Delahanty jump from the International Bridge in an act of suicide? He was despondent over his many troubles, most of which revolved around money, and very powerful baseball executives gave very little thought to the position that they had placed Delahanty in, forcing him to pay back his $4,000 advance, all for the sake of peace among the rich owners. Delahanty deplored the situation in which he found himself. Much of his communications appeared to indicate a desire to die. Indeed, he had even purchased a life insurance policy as if he expected to meet his demise before reaching New York. Or was Delahanty's death merely the result of several bad decisions that led to him accidentally plunging into the Niagara River? He had a drinking problem and got belligerently drunk. If Coles had merely contacted the Canadian police, as was apparently the proper policy, Delahanty would have been in custody and not dead, and there would not have been any scuffle between Kingston and Delahanty. Ed Delahanty was only 35 when he died. In the year before his death, he proved himself to be the best hitter among the American League, even at the age of 34. Even though he turned up overweight at the beginning of the 1903 season and started off slow, he climbed himself out of an early hole and was posting a very fine batting average at the time of his death. If he had survived, Ed Delahanty may have had a couple of more seasons left in him. Instead, whether the result of foul play, suicide, or an accident, his story stands as one of the most tragic tales from the early days of baseball. I do hope you enjoyed that video. The t-shirt, mug, and phone case you saw in the video are all available in our merch store. In fact, we have other baseball designs, as well as face masks and other products, also available in the merch store. A link will be available in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments if you have any ideas for any topics you would like to see in the future.